Hello, good evening, and welcome to another Thursday night edition of the Wrestling Inc. podcast. I'm your host, the content machine, Liam Crowley, and I am joined by an incredible guest today. You've seen his work published on Bleacher Report, Fansided, and What Culture. You've heard his voice all over Wrestle Rant Radio. He's back on the Thursday night edition of the Wrestling Inc. podcast, the one and only Graham GSM Matthews. Graham, it is an absolute privilege to be back on these microphones with you once again.
Liam, what's going on, dude? It's only been 3 weeks. I mean, it's literally been the same calendar month, but I'm back already. Very excited to be chatting with you about everything wrestling and Marvel and everything else going on today.
Well, yeah, you mentioned it right there. This show, as we say on every single Thursday night edition of the Wrestling Inc. podcast, we divide this into two camps, our wrestling news and our entertainment news. And with Cinemacon flourishing this week, I knew I had to turn to the guy who knows everything Marvel. So we'll get to that stuff later in the show for certain. But as for last week, we did not have a stream last week. I had some campus obligations. I'm still in college, guys. You know, only got a couple more
weeks away from graduating. Congrats, by the way, dude.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's wild to have, a turning point in my life happening in such a short amount of time. But we're trying to enjoy these days. And I love being able to hop on and talk all things wrestling and all things entertainment every single Thursday. So last week we had some campus television banquet obligations. Didn't win that award that I was nominated for, unfortunately. But hey, I would say we'll get them next year. But hey, we're graduating. So we don't know where we'll be next year. But we know where we are right now. And we're on the Wrestling Inc. podcast. And we're going to talk some news inside the ropes. We're going to start off with that AEW Dynamite that happened last night. Everyone broke it down on the Wrestling Inc. podcast on Wednesday, but I kind of want to talk a lot about what we saw happen with the TNT title. It's changed for not the second consecutive week, but the second consecutive week that it's been defended. The TNT title is in a weird spot right now because, as I put here in the rundown, Scorpio Sky did defeat Sammy Guevara to reclaim the TNT title, making him a two-time champion. But this is the fourth time the title has changed hands in 2022 alone. In 2021, by comparison, 3 total TNT title changes. And then if we go back to 2020, when the title was only around for half the year, it was introduced halfway into the summer, there were 4 total title changes. And there was a little bit of a hot potato situation there as well with Cody and Brody Lee. We obviously, I don't want to speculate too much, but we feel like might be in a spot where Brody had to drop the title. It was less of a storyline situation and more of a real life obligation. But we're in a spot right now where the TNT title, we've seen it on Sammy's waist. We've seen it on Scorpio Sky's waist, and they've flip-flopped like 3 times now total. My question to you, Graham, to kick off this podcast, does this devalue the title that, has been pretty consistently defended on weekly TV broadcasts?
So far, yes. So now I have mixed opinions on this. Literally, when this happened last night, I'm laughing to myself thinking this title means absolutely nothing. But then, listen, I don't want to give them the biggest benefit of the doubt because, AEW does long-term storytelling really well. What I saw after that match with Sky, with Ethan Page, and with Frankie Kazarian, I thought was really well done, with Kazarian coming down to congratulate his former partner on the win, Sky doing the whole SCU handshake, Ethan Page over on the side looking jealous. There's clearly a story there in that it looks like they're going to be turning Sky full-fledged face while keeping Lambert and Page heels, which is really what they need to clear up. Because it looked like they did a double turn with Sky and Guevara a couple of weeks ago, Battle of the Belts. That's fine and all. I think the Ty and Sammy stuff, they are better off as heels. I still think it's like a go-away heat type of thing. I'd rather change the channel at this point. I'm not a big fan of the pairing on screen. Again, like I said, they're better off as heels than as faces, but it is what it is. I think Sky has a lot of potential. I thought it was silly to take the championship off of him in the first place. But still, I think there's a lot more potential there with him going forward as champion. They've had a million different title changes. I think the stuff they did with Cody and Sammy, I didn't like. I thought that was silly. Doing multiple ladder matches to me is silly. WWE does so many ladder matches too. It also devalues that stipulation when we see like one a month, when we used to see it one a year or one every 2 years or whatever. So that's another thing too. But to me, listen, I know every champion is not going to hold the championship for 6 months. I get it. But like at the same time, I wish I know they couldn't foresee the Sammy heat coming. Like, I know that didn't really start happening until after he won the title won the championship back from Sky or whatever happened. Yeah, and to me, to answer your question in a short way, I do think it devalues the championship, but they got to keep the belt on Sky now, like permanently. Maybe not for 8 months, but at least for a couple of months. Give him a real reign. The guy deserves it. He's very talented. Do something else from Guevara. Please move on from this whole thing. It's just not good. And then hopefully we could see some real stuff with Sky as champion, some meaningful matches, title defenses, and really get back to where the championship was when Cody first held it. Even when Brody had it for like a month, he still had some title defenses against Orange Cassidy and Dustin Rhodes, among other people. So Miro had a good reign as well. If we can get back to those days where the championship meant a little more than it does now, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, you said a lot of things that I want to jump off of, but first I want to address some comments. Headlock Heel saying, congrats, Liam. Well, thank you so much. I very much appreciate that. Cade mentioning we just saw Tony Khan on TV right now, and I was like, whoa, did Tony Khan show up on Impact tonight? Nope, that's right. The NFL draft is going on. He's going to be in the war room with his father and the rest of the Jaguars crew. And then Anthony Y asking, hold up, Wrestle Rant, what shirt you have on? If I could guess before you reveal, is this WandaVision?
Yeah, so funny story. I mean, these are available on Amazon. This is nothing fancy. It's a sweatshirt. This is just Vision, but I bought these. My girlfriend sent me a link or showed me a TikTok. I'm not on TikTok. She sent me a TikTok of like a couple wearing these sweatshirts. So I got them for us as an anniversary thing, as corny as that sounds. About a year ago when the show was still really, really popular, coming off the success of the show, I had the Vision one. She has the Wanda one, and it's a very comfortable sweatshirt, and they're available on Amazon if I can plug them real quick. But yeah, it's a very comfortable shirt for a great show.
Well, that's sweet. I love the story behind the shirt. That's pretty cool. But to address some of the things you said about the title, I completely agree with this idea that it needs to stay on Sky moving forward. I wonder if the reason why they switched it to Sammy in the first place after Sky had just won it was because they wanted to turn Sammy heel. But to that, I say you could have had a post-match angle where Sky offers his hand out and then Sammy does the low blow or something. He doesn't need to cheat to win the title necessarily. What I will say, though, it's a little conspiracy theorist in my head, is I wonder, are they doing these hot potatoes as soon as possible? Because currently, Sammy is tied for the most TNT title reigns with Cody Rhodes. So I don't know if Tony Khan is that petty. I doubt he is. They haven't erased Cody Rhodes from the history books whatsoever. He was shown in highlights throughout this broadcast with various different video packages that were going on. But at the same time, one of the only records he holds in AEW right now is most TNT title reigns or most single championship reigns. No one has been a two-time tag team champion to my knowledge. No one has been a two-time world champion. No one has been a two-time women's champion. Not Nyla Rose. I don't think so.
No, you're right. Yeah, all one-time champions. Yeah.
So the only title that has had multiple reigns by one singular person is the TNT title. And we've seen it across 3 different people now with Cody Rhodes, Sammy Guevara, and Scorpio Sky. So I don't know if if they put it back on Sammy like next week or in the next month, I'm going to say waving the conspiracy flag. They were trying to get Cody Rhodes' record erased. But at the same time, I don't know. My biggest thing with championships and why I love AEW so much is because they feel prestigious, right? It's so rare that a title changes hands, and when it happens on television, it feels like something just changed. When Moxley lost the title to Omega, that TV event felt like the broadcast ended, and it wasn't just the Impact implications. It was the fact that a world title just changed hands on free television. Oh my God, that doesn't happen ever. And then the same thing with the tag team and the women's titles. Like when Thunder Rosa beat Britt Baker, it felt like a special moment. When Jurassic Express was able to capture the tag titles off of the Lucha Bros, it felt like a special moment. And before that, when the Lucha Bros beat the Young Bucks, that's my favorite match in AEW to date because of all the emotion that happened after the match and Penta sharing that really nice moment with his daughter and his wife. There's so much to love about those moments. And then when you have the kind of hot potato stuff, I get flack for this all the time, but to me, there's a lot of titles in wrestling that feel like props. It feels like, oh, this is just your accessory as a wrestler. Like you walk around with this title belt because wrestlers have title belts and your character isn't interesting enough, so we'll give you this nice accessory. I feel like a lot of WWE titles are like that because of the lack of contenders matches, because of the titles changing hands all the time. And to this day, AEW, I have felt like all of their titles mean something. Nowadays, even with the integration of the recent Ring of Honor championships, giving Samoa Joe a prop. I'm sorry, but we don't really know the value of the ROH TV title on AEW as of right now. The pure title being on Wheeler Yuta, one of the most prestigious titles in Ring of Honor. I went to Death Before Dishonor last fall when Gresham lost it to, I'm forgetting his name. Oh man, Josh Woods.
Josh Woods, right? Yeah.
Gresham had been reigning for like a year plus and putting on these technical bouts that were incredible. And then Josh Woods takes it off him. And then when Wheeler Yuta beat Josh Woods, it felt like, all right, we want to put this title on one of our AEW guys. Same thing with Samoa Joe winning the Ring of Honor Television Championship. And having those titles featured, like I said, it makes them feel less than. And so the TNT title being an AEW original title, I was just clinging on to the fact that like this feels so big, this feels so prestigious because of the weekly defenses by Darby going on for months on end, because of Cody's open challenge, because of, you know, the real world stuff that happened with Brody Lee sucks. But if we can take any positive away from that situation, they made that title feel like a 1B to the world title because of all the prestige they put around it, and Brody being the greatest TNT champion ever and gifting that title to his son and retiring that design. Like this title, they've done so much to bring it up to a certain level that's why it almost hurts a little more, these hot potato changes, because more than any other title, at least on a weekly basis, the TNT title they've done so much for it. And yeah, this story frustrates me a lot more than it should for most people. And I'm hoping that Sky can have a lengthy enough reign with weekly defenses in that main event slot to build it back up to where it once was.
Yeah, I completely agree, man. I think you made a great point when you say that what they did with Sammy and the whole double turn thing, the title change didn't need to happen in order to accomplish that. You could have done exactly what you said with the low blow after the match. And they knew Sammy was getting booed by that point. When he won the championship, it wasn't as if he won and that was the plan the whole time. I think they did that because they knew people wouldn't like it. Sky was only champion for a month. They probably figured that people were more behind Sky than they were Sammy. And I like Sammy. I think he's very talented, but I'm just kind of done with him in the TNT title picture. It's time to move on. Sky is a worthy guy of taking it back to the level, as you said, Liam, of which it was at before. The weekly defenses, and especially now, too. You talk about Cody's reign and Darby's reign, defending it every week. Was every opponent a high-profile opponent? No, but he was having quality matches, sometimes in the main event of Dynamite against 10 of the Dark Order of all people, but it was still a very good match. And especially now, though, you look at the roster, obviously it's more stacked now than it has been at any other point in the last 3 years. There are so many people, dude, that don't even sniff television time between this giant roster, including Ring of Honor. You can bring in someone like a Josh Woods, or I know Brian Cage, they're doing other stuff with in the Ring of Honor portion of the company now, but people that we barely see on the show. Someone like they kind of did it with Tony Nese a little bit when Sammy was champion. They gave him a title shot, but focus on that championship more, give it more television time. And they do have a lot of titles at this point. They have a lot of championships they kind of have to manage and split up television time with. Because as you mentioned, the Ring of Honor titles, we're getting a Ring of Honor women's title match next week. I think that's awesome. I'm looking forward to Mercedes Martinez versus Deonna Purrazzo. I think that's great. But then that's less time that's going to the TBS champion, Jade Cargill, their own championship. I mean, I guess the Ring of Honor title is their title now too because they have that acquisition going on. But still, that's like, if you do the math, it's probably closer to 10 championships they have. And it's not as if they have more television time. I don't count Dark. They don't defend titles on Dark anyway. They have 3 hours of TV time between Rampage and Dynamite. That's it. 3 hours, and especially how much they try to cram into those two periods, or into those two shows within a 3-hour period, is a lot anyway. So, yeah, with the TNT title, I really hope that this is a turning point. We can get back to where it was. Because I agree, they did a lot of great stuff with the Cody Rhodes Open Challenge. That's how Ricky Starks got a job there. Eddie Kingston got a job out of the Open Challenge, among other people. And it was an exciting time, especially during a point where there were almost no fans in attendance. That was in the smack dab of the pandemic, and that was one of the best parts of the show. People could say what they will about Cody. I did not like what he was doing towards the end there, but a lot of the stuff that he was doing as TNT champion was great. I wasn't even a fan of when Cody got the belt back on Christmas last year. I thought that was incredibly random for all of a month. I mean, that was just so weird. So I don't know, dude, but I completely agree with everything you said. I'm not a big hot potato title match guy. Maybe it's the fact that we started watching later. Other people that like that sort of stuff maybe started watching during the Attitude Era. I don't know, just the thought, because they were doing that stuff all the time back then. Kane was champion for like 24 hours. If that was today, I would think that it was bullshit. You know what I mean? I would hate that. So I'm not a big hot potato fan. I would hope they move away from that going forward, but that's my own personal preference.
And I wonder if it's something that's changed with the wrestling culture too, because in WWE, they don't value title reigns. They value how many times you held the title. It's like the 16-time champion, John Cena and Ric Flair. They're going to have Charlotte Flair break Ric Flair's record eventually. Like they're setting up that storyline to happen. While in AEW, at least so far, there's been lengthy enough title reigns that they very much advertise on Jon Moxley's lower third, held the AEW title for 280 plus days, whatever it was. Same thing with Darby Allin during the weeks and weeks of defenses. It would say how many consecutive defenses he had. And to me, that's always felt a little bit more special. But the problem is, with a small company like AEW, that's why it works, because it hasn't been around for that long. But when you have like a company like a WWE, and you have someone like, when I first started watching WWE, John Cena was a 10-time champion, and then CM Punk had just won the title, and he was very much trying to emphasize 434 days. That's a big accomplishment. But side by side to John Cena, 10-time champion, Randy Orton, 8-time champion at the time, Triple H, 11-time champion at the time, it just felt like smaller than. So I think AEW has such a rich possibility, or a rich potential, to make the value of championship reigns, defenses, and days held, not how many times you held the title. Because Punk said it in a promo back in 2011 or 2012 when I was first started watching. He talked about how, like, someone said I was like the 16-time champion. He goes, yeah, that means you lost it 15 times to get to this point. Like that, we should value the fact of how many times you can hold on to it. So who knows what happens with the future of the TNT title. I do hope that as we get closer to Double or Nothing, we establish a little bit more continuity, like make it feel more prestigious, and hopefully Sammy and Ty just move on. Obviously, Sammy's a guy that they want to have on the show, and it's easy to get him on the show when he's linked to a title, and it's going to be harder for him to be on the show when he's not linked to a title and when he's not in a faction, because as it's very clear these days in AEW, if you want TV time, you got to surround yourself with either gold or your friends. And I don't know what happens with him moving forward, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think factions are an easy way to get people on television, get a lot of people on television, that is. But yeah, I'm hoping for a lengthy reign from Sky. I think they might be teasing some friction with Ethan Page. I think that would be a banger match, Ethan Page versus Scorpio Sky at Double or Nothing. They're obviously going Kazarian as soon as next week, possibly, against Sky, which will be really neat because they were the first people to hold the AEW tag titles. Like, even though SCU didn't really reach their full potential in AEW, a lot of people will say they jumped the shark in Ring of Honor, which is not a bad thing. I just think they were featured more there. You know, having those two go at it, there's a built-in story, and I think we'll get a pretty sweet road to Dynamite, you know, a little mini documentary leading up to it. So I don't know. I think the TNT title right now, I'm not in love with where it's at, but I'm optimistic about the future because we saw how much they valued it during Revolution. That giant ladder match with all the hosses, they were all gunning for the fact that they wanted to challenge for the title. And, you know, who knows? I'm optimistic. One question I'll leave you with, though, with Scorpio hopefully having a lengthy reign for now, who do you want to be the person to eventually take it off him? And when do you want to see that happen? Closer to All Out, Full Gear, or maybe on a random episode of Dynamite later in the year?
That's a good question. Another thing we forgot to mention too, kind of on the subject of Scorpio, why would they break his undefeated streak after like 4? I mean, listen, the streak didn't really mean anything anyway because he was on Dark all the time, but like, I don't know, dude. Just keep that going. Like, if he's going to be champion now, keep that going until someone can end it. But whatever. I guess they wanted to give Sammy more heat for beating him for it, and then Sky took the championship off of him 2 weeks later. But whatever. It's a good question. If Sky's going to be a babyface, it's not that a heel has to beat him because Darby beat Cody for the championship 2 years ago, and they were both babyfaces at that point. So you don't need a heel to beat him. But thinking about the roster now, I'm done with like the 2-time champion stuff for right now. I'd rather see someone new win it because they have such a deep roster. Like, I would love to see Jungle Boy as champion at some point.
Too, specifically.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like, I'm thinking, you know, the people that I'm thinking of are like Keith Lee and Swerve, but I don't see them being the ones to take the belt off of Sky. Honestly, maybe Ricky Starks or Powerhouse Hobbs. I know they're doing the tag team thing right now. He's going for the tag titles, I think, on Dynamite. I missed it, but I heard about it. So maybe they'll lose. And then honestly, I think Starks is TNT. Get the FTW. You talk about props. That is if you look at the word prop in the dictionary, the FTW title is right next to it. I mean, it's completely worthless. So dump that crap. Give it to Hulk. Maybe he can throw it out or something. I don't know. And then give Ricky Starks the TNT title. So there's probably other names I'm not thinking of. Like, I'd love to see Eddie Kingston as champion at some point. That doesn't make sense for him to beat Sky just in my mind right now. And anything can change in the next couple of months. But let's say Starks. And as far as when, probably closer. It's almost May now. All Out's in September. So probably closer to All Out. If not All Out, maybe soon after. They haven't done, have they? I'm thinking, have they done any TNT title changes on pay-per-view? They almost all of them have happened on TV. I know Cody won on pay-per-view.
And I believe Darby beat Cody at Full Gear.
Oh, you're right. You're right. So
but
those
still,
two,
that was
and that was
2020.
a while ago.
Yeah,
it's been a while. So, they could do it. Maybe All Out. They could do Ricky Starks versus Sky. But again, they could bring in another 10 people before then, or someone may not be there or whatever. But I'll say Starks at around All Out time for now.
Yeah, and I like Starks winning because my guy after Starks, because I'll agree with you on this, I want Hook. I want Hook.
Oh, it's going to happen. Yeah, it'll happen. Yeah.
It's going to happen, but they're clearly very patient with him. He's only just now had his first Dynamite match. His first feud, his first real feud, aside from the QT Marshall stuff, is going to be with Danhausen, which I think is a perfect starter feud for him. And if we push this as far as maybe Starks wins it at All Out, if we're just booking to the future here, have Hook win the Face of the Revolution ladder match, and then he doesn't necessarily want to go against Team Taz, but hey, the gold is more important than friendships, and then I think that's when you have Hook win. And this is looking as far as the future of March 2023, but they're clearly that patient with Hook, and I think if they don't overexpose him, it's weird to compare him to Ryback, but the reason why I say that is because Ryback was having squash matches all the time on SmackDown, which back then in 2012, WWE SmackDown was so much lesser than Raw because it was pre-taped, and he was squashing guys from NXT, local talent and all that, and he got so naturally over with barely saying anything. He was a much more flashier and charismatic wrestler than Hook, but again, he was getting over on his own on a show that's watched significantly by significantly less people, and then all of a sudden, world title match with CM Punk. He's losing his undefeated streak, and then he's losing to Mark Henry at WrestleMania the next year. Hook, I feel is in a similar spot to where it's he's having these squash matches, slowly transitioning into showcase matches a little bit, but as we get closer to a title, he's obviously, the AEW World title is a lot more protected than the WWE title was back in 2012, but having him eventually get that first mid-card championship, it does not need to happen as soon as Double or Nothing. This is a long-term booking scenario. And I think if we look to as far as Revolution of next year, I think that's a perfect patient storytelling finish line of this story of Hook cementing his way up the card.
Definitely. I think early 2023 makes sense. I mean, I think the Ryback comparison is great. I mean, I think on paper, people will see that or say he's not Ryback. Why would you say? I mean, if you were watching SmackDown in 2012, which no one was, but if you were watching SmackDown in 2012, you would get the comparison because he was really over on a pre-tape show, no less. And then when he appeared on Raw, like you said, he was facing nobodies. He was facing the Colognes and Titus O'Neil and Darren Young and people like that. And then all of a sudden, he was in the main event of a pay-per-view, and it was believable. They shouldn't have rushed him to that point, obviously, especially if it was a Hell in the Cell match and he wasn't going to get DQ'd or whatever. And then he had to get beat because he wasn't going to be Punk. Just the timing didn't work out well. The whole Rock thing was, I can go on a rant about this for a long time. But the biggest similarity is, like you said, they were both organically over. He's organically over now as Hook. As long as they take their time with him, he's still super young. I'm not even the biggest Hook fan. I don't have a Hook shirt or anything like that, but I'm not a hooker, as they say. But I still think that he's a guy. Listen, doesn't matter if you like him or not. If he's popular, you run with it. And the AEW fans, they love him. So why wouldn't you capitalize on that? So like you said, I think the long-term story there with Ricky Starks, who's finally getting more TV time. Same thing with Hobbs. I think they're both great. They were underutilized for a while last year, and that was before they even brought everyone in. They were barely on the show. But they're on the show more now, which is great. And I think Starks is TNT champion, the one to help elevate Hook to that next level. Could Hook be a future world champion? We don't know. He's got to have a more competitive match at some point, and a guy like Starks could give that to him. And as long as they give Hook more meaningful feuds in the next 6 months, and Danhausen is a good first foe for him, then I think he's well on his way. I think you're pretty right on the money as far as Hook being TNT champion by around this time next year.
Yeah. Well, we started this topic very frustrated with the TNT title. I think we're looking at it a lot more glass half full, which is great news. Some comments here from the listeners. Sherrod Jones saying, first time listener, loving the show so far. Well, we're so happy to have you, Sherrod. We also have another comment here from M. Pedo64. I hope I pronounced that correctly. A whole bunch, but one that caught my eye: Eddie Kingston beating Punk for the world title at Arthur Ashe later in the year. I think MJF should be the one to take the title off of Punk. But the reason why I pulled up this question is because it's a perfect segue to our next story, that talking about WWE Stadium Shows. AEW's run just the one stadium show with Arthur Ashe. And is it a stadium? Is it an arena? It's kind of in that middle point. It holds more than a general arena, but it's not exactly a football stadium. But football stadiums are something that WWE and President Nick Khan have their eyes laser focused on. This comes from Andrew Zarian of the Mat Men podcast. Nick Khan, WWE's president, is looking to make stadium shows the, quote, new norm moving forward. The quote from the report reads as follows: the scalability of large stadiums is very beneficial when it comes to having live attendance over 15,000. The event doesn't have to be a sellout of 50,000 plus, but now you have room to do more 20 to 35,000 shows more often, leading to much higher revenue and higher level of excitement for the event. Looking at 2022, it's already clear they're making this a new norm, because so far we've seen the Royal Rumble, Elimination Chamber, and 2 nights of WrestleMania in stadiums. And later this year, we have Money in the Bank, SummerSlam, and 2 untitled pay-per-views from the United Kingdom and Saudi Arabia still left on the schedule. Graham, I will ask you, are these frequent stadium shows a good thing, or will fans burn out of the large-scale events quickly?
I think for the bigger shows, it makes sense. We won't really know until after that 3 stretch period that you mentioned with Money in the Bank, SummerSlam, and the UK show. The UK show is obviously going to do well. I think it came out as soon as tickets went on sale about a week ago. They had already sold, 55, 60,000 or pre-sold or whatever it was. I mean, that doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, the fans over there are really passionate. They're awesome. So and they haven't had a pay-per-view there in 25 years, and like an actual pay-per-view 30 years. But if we were talking like the one and only stuff, then probably 20, 25 years. But anyway, that doesn't really surprise me. SummerSlam, we'll see how it does. I mean, it also depends in the next couple of months with the pandemic. Does it get worse again? Do cases go back up? Depends where it is. That's another factor. But I think the amount of stadium shows they're doing now in 2022 is fine. That report indicates, it makes it sound like they're going to do more. Are we doing Hell in a Cell in a stadium? Like, are we doing Extreme Rules in a stadium? That's what I'm saying. Like, the bigger shows make sense. The big fork one. Like, the funny thing is that of all the shows you just mentioned, the one show that's not getting a stadium show this year, and I'm not shocked, is Survivor Series. They're actually going to Boston this year, which is, I'm going to be there for that one. Yeah. Did you know that?
I did not know that, but if you're going to be there, I might try to make the trip. I mean, it's right now it's in my backyard. I don't know where I'm going to be living come November, but still, no, yeah, I might have to return to Beantown for Survivor Series.
Yeah, I think it's a TD Garden, which is cool, but no, I'll definitely be there for that one. I haven't been in the show, The Garden, forever, but anyway, it's funny that's like the one show that's not going to be in a stadium this year because no one gives a shit about Survivor Series at this point, but the other shows are fine, like the 2 Saudi shows. They've been doing stadium shows in Saudi for 4 or 5 years now. That makes sense. Money in the Bank is really the biggest risk because it's not a Rumble or a Mania, but then again, it's definitely bigger than Survivor Series. That really is the new big 4 to a lot of people, and I would concur. I think that'll do fine, especially in Vegas. They were in Vegas last year for SummerSlam. By all accounts, they didn't sell out the place, but they did decently well. So with Money in the Bank being a big show, and it's always been a big show, then I think it should be fine. The other ones, I mean, yeah, UK, I don't know if that'll be an annual thing, but if that is, that should be in a stadium. Mania will always be in a stadium. Rumble makes sense. SummerSlam makes sense. So again, if they're doing the same amount next year as they are this year, depending on, again, like I said, it really is all dependent on how those stadium shows do this summer. If they don't do well, then they'll probably back off of it. So it's really a test run of sorts, but so far so good. And if it's only the bigger shows and not Hell in a Cell or Extreme Rules or Backlash or whatever, like 50,000 people are not paying money to go see Backlash in a stadium. But beyond that, I think they'll do well, honestly. Optimistically speaking, I could be wrong.
Well, that's WrestleMania Backlash to you. Don't forget the full name of the show. No, but in all seriousness, like, to me, I look at this and I look at it in 2 camps. I look at it as a diehard fan a little bit, and I go, well, if we do them every single month, WrestleMania feels a lot less special.
Agreed, yeah.
We have the giant ramp and the giant sets and everything. And sure, when they go to Saudi, they only ever just do the giant LED screen. They don't do a crazy big set. But at the same time, when I look at it from a business perspective, I don't even look at it as a revenue thing, because that's what it says here in the quote from Nick Khan saying, oh, we can have higher revenue if we sell more tickets, if we're at a bigger capacity. Sure, I understand that, but I don't even think that's the goal. I think you look at side by side right now, because I always tell people, my younger brother texted me the other day and he was like, what's the WWE Network password? I'm looking to get back into wrestling. And
I
was like,
saw
"First
that
off,
too. You posted that.
that
Yeah, I saw it.
it's so sweet, right? Like I love, when I'm not trying to force my passions onto anyone, but like when people just reach out, they're like, hey, that wrestling thing looks a little cool. And I
Yeah.
pushed him and I was like, hey, check out, here's my Bleacher Report account as well. Check out some of the AEW pay-per-views. I think you'd really dig AEW as well. And he was asking like, oh, do they even have like weekly TV? And it's like, to people who are super casual wrestling fans who aren't aware of the product and everything, it's hard to get invested into a company like an AEW, like an Impact, like a New Japan, because it's a lot more niche. And WWE, because they are so mainstream, because when people think of pro wrestling, people sometimes describe pro wrestling as WWE. Like when I tell people I write and I podcast about pro wrestling, they're like, oh, so WWE. And I'm like, well, there's more beyond that. But WWE has had such a stranglehold on the market for the past 2 decades because the other shows in town were so small that they've just become now associated with pro wrestling. And when I look at stadium shows like this, when you have a competitor like AEW, the first time we've seen competition like this in 20-25 years, when you have monthly pay-per-views and you're running them at stadium shows, it doesn't matter what the card looks like. It doesn't matter how much people complain about what storylines are going on. When casual fans see a sold out stadium, once every 2 months, once every month and a half, once every 6 weeks, it just feels bigger. And like AEW, it's great. I love the fact that we only have 4 pay-per-views a year because it makes them feel more special. Like it makes those title defenses on TNT, the fact that they're more frequent, it's cool because, like I said, it ups the value of the title. It ups the value of weekly television because we space out the pay-per-views so much. But those pay-per-views are only being held at arenas. And very recently, we're seeing the United Center is going to host the New Japan Super Show, which I think is really cool. United Center, obviously a bigger venue for AEW, more alike a professional sports audience versus a college sports audience. But at the same time, when Double or Nothing, or excuse me, when All Out happens in August, if that ends up being at the United Center, great. You've sold 20,000 tickets, but 4 weeks earlier, SummerSlam's happening in a stadium in Nashville. And a couple weeks before that, Money in the Bank is happening at a stadium in Las Vegas. Side-by-side comparisons, sure. We want all wrestling to flourish. We don't always have to pit the two against each other. But when you just look at fan bases, it doesn't matter how many fans AEW has virtually and how many fans WWE has virtually. When you see them physically, and WWE is double, triple the audience size, they just feel more important. And so from a business perspective, filling stadiums makes you feel like the biggest show in town. And I think it makes sense from Nick Khan.
No, you're right, man. I think that's another thing, actually. It's funny that you mentioned that. I think that's one of the positives, honestly, of AEW. Obviously, compared to WWE, they're a lot smaller in that respect. But I think that was one of the things they had going for them when Dynamite first started. When you think back to the initial Wednesday Night Wars, when it was NXT and Dynamite, NXT at that point, not a great show weekly now. It has its weeks, but even back then when the show first started on Wednesdays live, NXT was a phenomenal show, but it was still it was still a Full Sail University, which is a great venue and they're a great crowd. But on paper, or when you watch the show, knowing nothing about them, it looks like really just a televised independent show with a couple hundred people there. You watch Dynamite around that point now, there's not tens of thousands of people like even Raw and SmackDown, their attendance is down, but there were thousands of people in attendance. The set looked bigger. It looked a lot more grandiose. It looked like a much bigger deal, much bigger league than a Bush League promotion on paper in NXT. And NXT was doing even sometimes better shows than Dynamite, but it didn't look like a big deal. It didn't feel like a big deal. And it makes sense for NXT 2.0 because it really is prime developmental. But that's why those takeover shows were some of the best shows, period, of the last 10, 15 years, because they were in the bigger arenas. The early ones were some of the best shows too, but I'm talking like TakeOver Brooklyn 1 through 4 or all the other TakeOver shows. They were always in the Barclays Center or in a surrounding arena around Mania weekend or SummerSlam weekend. They felt like a big deal, having that big atmosphere, like you said. And that's why I hate to say it, like Impact's on now. I think Impact is honestly, I watch it every week, one of the best products of any wrestling show right now. But almost nobody watches it for 2 different reasons. One, it's not on like an easy place to watch for a lot of people. You talk about like convenience and what channel do I tune into? They don't have that. They burnt out a lot of their audience with a lot of the dumb stuff, a lot of the dumb mistakes they made years ago is the second thing. And the third thing is that when you watch their shows, they only have a couple hundred people there, and you could barely even see them just due to the lighting and stuff. They're not doing these blockbuster attendance numbers as they used to. And Ring of Honor, the same thing towards the end there. They had great products, but if it doesn't look great from a TV presentation standpoint, TV presentation is, okay, maybe not everything, but it is a big part of it, and attracting new viewers that know nothing about your product. So you're right. WWE, for as bad as some of their shows can be, and I think we discussed earlier, Raw was a pretty good show this week. It still looks like a big deal. People will still watch WrestleMania because it's WrestleMania. And this year's WrestleMania was great. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. But if it looks bigger and better on TV, the WWE product creatively, you can argue, is bad or good or whatever. But their presentation, for the most part, and the camera cuts have got to go. But like as far as the crowds they're doing and the way they shoot things and the video packages, it's second to none. Like, people watching the draft right now, I know it's not on Fox. I think it's on ABC. But if you watch football on Fox, you'll see advertising for SmackDown. You watch SmackDown, it has a big feel to it. I know, like you said, I know a lot of people that are not wrestling fans that will stumble across Raw or SmackDown and continue to watch it as far as the remainder of the episode, because it looks like a big deal and there's people they know and stuff like that. AEW is doing a better job of that. They need to do a better job of that. The audio isn't always the greatest, but it's all about presentation, as you mentioned. The stadium shows have that feel to it, regardless of how bad or good the show is. If they can nail the atmosphere, which is a big part of it, that's not all that matters, but like I said, it's a big piece of the pie, and WWE has that. AEW is trying to get that, and I'm glad that's something that's being talked about.
And one thing I appreciate too from a fan perspective is because I mentioned how it lacks the specialty if we do it too frequently.
Yeah.
But I do like the idea, as you mentioned, the takeovers happening at arenas and then having the weekly TV on Full Sail. When it was side by side with AEW, it was tough. Like, you know, it's hard to be invested, even as someone who was diehard invested in both NXT and AEW at the time. When I'm choosing which broadcast I'm going to watch live and which one I'm going to watch on replay, AEW, just it's a louder crowd reaction. It feels like a bigger deal. But when NXT was just on the network and they were building up to the takeovers and everything, the fact that we changed capacities also made those shows feel bigger, because if NXT was running out of a Barclays Center on a weekly basis, or at least arenas similar to that size, the takeovers wouldn't feel anything but like an annexation of what's going on weekly TV. That's a problem I've had with WWE pay-per-views for a while, not just some of the matches being TV essentially matches. Having the pay-per-views have not just the same set as Raw, but taking place in the same arena that would host Raw. Like,
true.
A pay-per-view should feel like a bigger thing. And WWE's at that point now. Well, they're never going to go back down. And you could argue about ticket sales recently that maybe they should do more college arenas so they could actually be at full capacity and not have to tarp off rafters and everything.
True.
But if we're going to go and build up to a show for 4 weeks and be running at NBA sized arenas, it only makes sense for that end destination to be a step above. Because if we just do another NBA sized arena at the end, it just makes it feel like more of an extension of Raw or SmackDown, and not that goes beyond the matches. The fact that Drew McIntyre versus Madcap Moss felt like a big deal is all because Elimination Chamber took place in a Saudi Arabia sized stadium. Like, that match is a SmackDown filler match, but I was tricked into thinking that, man, this is a WrestleMania main event. This is Hogan and Andre, because the crowd was invested, because the place was loud, and because they had long, grandiose entrances. So little things like that, like you said, presentation is everything. And even for people who are super dialed into the product, you can make me kind of just like think this is a big deal for a second and get me more invested. I was more invested in McIntyre versus Corbin because of the Elimination Chamber payoff and everything, and because of how they were able to have that happen. So can WWE sell out these arenas, these stadiums, on a monthly basis? I don't think so, but I like the idea of doing more, maybe 15 to 25,000 seat arenas and going from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to the argument, and this will never happen, but honestly, I think it'd be cool, ideally, go back to the days of like the 80s and whatever, where you only had those stadium shows that you're talking about. You only have those, and you don't have the WrestleMania backlashes, or you don't have the Hell in the Cells, which is completely pointless anyway, and Extreme Rules, another completely pointless pay-per-view, and you only have the stadium shows. Like you said, we had Elimination Chamber, Rumble, Mania is one show, I know it was 2 nights, but WrestleMania, the 3 this summer, that's 6 right there. Saudi later on in the year, that's 7. So I think 7 stadium shows. There might be another one I'm forgetting here. But that's a decent amount. If you have 7 shows a year, like I love the AEW schedule. There's one like every couple of months. There's 4 a year. WWE will never do that again. But if they do one every couple of months, one every 2 months, I think that'd be manageable. This pay-per-view coming up next weekend should be a good show. I would hope it has a good card on paper. Does it really need to happen? Could they do these matches on TV? Yeah, they could do a Saturday night special where I think AEW's use of the whole Battle of the Belts thing has been kind of misused so far because they haven't felt like special shows. But I like the idea of doing specials like NXT kind of does now. With Spring Break in next week, and they had Halloween Havoc. Those aren't takeovers, but they're special shows they do in between the takeovers. WWE could do something similar, like with the WrestleMania Backlash, and then have the stadium shows. Like you said, I never really thought about that, but the pay-per-views do feel like glorified Raws and SmackDowns for sure. They're not bad shows necessarily. I'm talking like I said, the Backlashes, the Hell in the Cells. They're never must say. They're good shows, but you can have those good shows on Mondays and Fridays. So I would agree. I would kind of personally only do the stadium shows. I know that'll never happen. They like having their money. And they probably signed a deal with Peacock saying that we need to have at least one premium live event. I mean, I hate even saying that. We discussed that before, but they got to have one a month or two every whatever. So it is what it is. We'll never go back to having that. Like, it was ridiculous and some of those shows were good, but like when they first brought back the brand split in 2016, they were doing like 2 pay-per-views a month, one for Raw, one for SmackDown. Oh my God. Some of those shows were great. Some of those shows were putrid because it's like we had so much content. And now with AEW, I would die of the amount of content we would be getting if that was now. So yeah, I agree. Stadium shows, I feel like make them special. Do them once in a while, but I feel like the pay-per-view should also feel like a bigger deal. I completely agree with you there.
There's something about these stories, Graham, today. We start with such frustration and maybe hesitation. By the time we end them, we're like, yeah, wait, maybe this is a good idea. We talk through it. I love that. Before we switch over avenues to entertainment, I want to give a quick acknowledgement to Anthony Y, who says, Liam, acknowledge me. You are acknowledged, Anthony, and you actually dropped a great question that I want to bring up before we get into Cinemacon news. And that is, what are your thoughts on Gunther beating Roman at the UK Stadium show for the Universal title? I'm not going to lie to you on this one. Not only do I think it's not going to happen, I don't want it to happen. Gunther is not Walter. I'm sorry. I don't know what it is. It's the same issue I have with Pete Dunne, and it's not just the Butch factor. It's both of those guys during their glory days with NXT UK felt like the man. And I don't know what changed, but it was a slow, gradual process of them being moved over to black and yellow NXT, because Gunther, even before his name was changed from Walter, I thought he was overexposed on NXT black and gold. I thought towards the end of his UK title reign, he was a lot less intimidating. And the same thing with Pete Dunne. And also, too, it's a very weird thing. They're both in really good shape right now, but they both slimmed down a little bit. And Gunther, when I see him wrestling on SmackDown, he feels like kind of just another guy. And back in the day when he had that crazy takeover match with Pete Dunne and he's doing a splash from the top rope and it's this super heavyweight who's not exactly chiseled, he's more of like a Samoa Joe build, but he felt intimidating, he felt like a presence. And now I just don't feel that anymore, and it sucks because it's so hard to establish that aura that when you lose it, it feels just much more disappointing. But yeah, I think that Gunther is eventually going to get a world title shot against Roman. I don't know if it comes with the UK pay-per-view. That might be McIntyre's shot, but I think they're going to build him up to be main event status. But I don't see him walking away with top gold anytime soon.
I don't. Yeah, my opinion on this changed in the last couple of months. I think when this whole thing was initially rumored earlier this year, maybe late last year, I forgot when the rumors of a UK show around that point started being rumored, but I'm thinking, Walter and Roman on that show would be awesome. And like Roman's still as hot now as he was back then, maybe a little bit less, has a little bit less buzz. He has barely been on the shows since he won the unified title at WrestleMania. But anyway, with Gunther, though, he's lost a lot of that buzz for pretty much every reason that you mentioned, Liam. Listen, I think it's great that he's in shape, like you said, but part of the aura that he had was the fact that he could do all these amazing things for being a guy that big. He's still doing those same things, but I saw Keith Lee doing those same things, and he's bigger than Walter is, or Gunther, or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like you said, it wasn't like an instantaneous thing where it's like one day he's special, one day he's not. The name doesn't help. The music was I'm a big music guy. When you change the music, and it is similar, it's not awful music, but when you hear that da-da, like it's like, oh, this is about to go down. They don't have that aura anymore. And like you said, like when you lose that aura, it's hard to get it back. I feel bad for people that don't watch NXT or NXT UK because they'll never know what Walter was even 3 years ago. Maybe they will when he, I hate to say this, but if and when leaves the company or gets fired or whatever, he can go back to doing that stuff in AEW or elsewhere. But as far as the main roster goes, I don't want to say he's damaged goods. He's barely just debuted. They just, they're building him up, and I think that's great. They need new stars. Is he going to be one of the pillars of this promotion for the next 5-10 years? I doubt it. I'm sure they'll give up on him within a couple of months, if not a year. That's just what they do. I think if in any other circumstance, I would entertain the idea. I could think of far worse people to beat Roman than Gunther. Like, I've seen people have tried to pitch me, oh, what about John Cena? I'm like, no, thanks. Like, maybe at some point down the road, not now. Even Orton, who I think is doing the best work of his career right now. Whoever beats Roman it's got to be a big deal. Orton is not that guy. Cena's not that guy. I mean, listen, I know we're biased here because we're fans, but it should be Cody Rhodes. It's got to be Cody Rhodes. It makes sense for it to be Cody. Gunther at this point makes no sense. So that's just my 2 cents on that. But yeah, I think maybe at some point, could he be world champion with the right booking? Maybe. But honestly, I think for now, I look at him and think Intercontinental champion. Not that it really matters because that belt is completely trash right now. But maybe if he could beat Ricochet, they could have a fun feud. He can win that title. Maybe at some point down the road, maybe we can get to him being a main eventer. But I just don't see that happening right now.
Yeah, the last time I felt Walter was special, and it's one of my biggest what ifs due to the pandemic changing wrestling, is when Marcel Bartel and Fabian Eichner showed up on Black and Gold NXT when they were still exclusive to UK, and they said Walter sends his regards to Finn Balor. And we could have, when we were gonna get NXT Takeover Dublin, I believe it was gonna take place in some county in Ireland, we were going to get Finn Balor versus Walter. And the idea of Walter, like I said, protecting that aura, not having him show up, having his goons go and send their regards by attacking Balor, a feud that we never ended up getting. That was the last time to me he felt like, man, this is the mob boss from overseas that just sent his boys to send a message to one of the UK's finest talents who's not on NXT UK. So who knows? I think, like you said, with the right booking, Gunther, Walter, whatever, he can get back to that good status. But it's got to take, consistency, and it's got to take commitment. It can't be something where we go 50-50, where he's winning all of a sudden, then, carrying cross situation, and he feels like a nobody in short notice. So, again, consistency and commitment. I think Walter, Gunther can get back to a good spot. But as of right now, I don't see it, and I wouldn't necessarily bet on it. But we want to switch over to some entertainment news before we wrap up out of here. Cinemacon happened this week in Las Vegas, Nevada. A whole bunch of announcements, whole bunch of panels from all the major studios. We got a lot of announcements, not really any footage. Cinemacon wonky in a little bit because it's a exclusive event to where only certain people are credentialed to be able to live tweet from it, and those people are barred from taking like any photos whatsoever. So we get our occasional press release official photos after the fact, but all footage that went out was just descriptions. And there was some lengthy footage as well. They showed the first 20 minutes of Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. They showed, I believe, the first 30 minutes of the new Buzz Lightyear movie. I think they showed a portion of Avatar 2. But the biggest takeaway from this weekend, and this is a very niche takeaway because my circles are very, tunnel visioned to my passion, is the fact that Bad Bunny is going to be starring in a Marvel movie, and not a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, a Sony Marvel movie. So that, there's a little asterisk there as to what that means. The character he's going to be playing is named El Muerto. And El Muerto, for those who don't know, is a Spider-Man villain. Classic, in line with the Morbiuses and the Venoms that are getting live action adaptations. But Graham, here's the real kicker. El Muerto has appeared in 2 comics. Not 2 runs, not 2 graphic novels, not 2 omnibuses, 2 individual issues. This is a character who's barely been touched, and all of a sudden he's getting a movie, and Bad Bunny's going to be tapped to play him. And for those who don't know about El Muerto, I'm kind of an expert because I was able to read, all 6 pages he's featured in preparation for this podcast. Not exactly a lot of homework. He's a pro wrestler. So, Bad Bunny, musician first, but he's proved that he can hit Canadian destroyers. Graham, what was your reaction to hearing this news? Are you looking forward to Bad Bunny stepping into the ring once again, but with Hollywood cameras?
Well, as far as my reaction, I had to check the calendar and make sure it wasn't April 1st. I literally thought it was a joke. I did not think it was real when someone asked me about this the other day. And I was stoked. And when I found out it was actually real, I'm like, wow, that's real. Not just a fan casting. Like, that's pretty cool. And correct me if I'm wrong. The tweet that I had seen, it indicated he would become like the first Latino superhero to get a Marvel movie. Is that accurate?
I believe so, and I don't think any Latino has been spotlighted in a leading role in
Yeah.
any superhero movie. It's gonna happen with Blue Beetle. Blue Beetle is gonna be played by a Latino actor, and that's gonna happen in the next couple of years. That might be an HBO Max exclusive, but either way, Warner Brothers is doing it and it's in development. Sony's also doing it and it's in development. Nothing has happened so far.
Well, yeah, I think it's still pretty cool. I mean, that's a great little asterisk to have on his name. I'm not even sure what other acting stuff this guy has done. Like, is he done any other acting aside from music and wrestling? Like, or is that it?
He's got a movie coming up called Bullet Train
Okay.
with Brad Pitt, I believe. So
That's
he's it's a Sony release too. So it might be a situation of, they were impressed by what they've seen so far, even though the movie hasn't come out yet, and they wanted to tap into him. But I also just look at it as this guy, for those who don't know his music, people are more familiar with the name now because he's been in WWE for, a couple different spells. This guy is like the Latin Drake. Like he's up
yeah.
there with Taylor Swift, Harry Styles, like Ed Sheeran in terms of worldwide popularity. And it's clear based on his WWE performances that when he's committed to something, he's committed. He's all in. So I don't doubt that he's going to give it his all. But based on how Morbius went, I don't doubt it's not going to be an Academy Award winner.
I haven't seen Morbius yet. I know that came out Mania weekend, and I still want to see it.
Came out on April 1st. Yeah,
It did actually come out April 1st. You're right. It did. I think the box office was a joke as far as what some of the people in Sony expected it to do, and it didn't end up doing that great. But I still intend to see it at some point. I don't want any spoilers on it because I'm a big spoiler-free person, which is ironic coming from people involved with wrestling. We get shit spoiled all the time. It is what it is. But yeah, no, I heard the Bad Bunny news. I'm thinking that's pretty cool. I will still go see this stuff regardless. I try to see as much DC stuff as possible. Love the Batman when that came out a couple months ago. But I try to see all the Marvel stuff, even if it's something that's not directly correlated to the MCU. I saw the Venom movies, thoroughly enjoyed those. I will see Morbius at some point. And especially, even if this wasn't a Marvel project, I would still see it for Bad Bunny. I mean, this guy went from, at least for wrestling fans, went from a complete unknown. When they announced that he'd be at the 2021 Royal Rumble performing for Booker T, the song about Booker T, we're all thinking, why are they wasting time on this? And I know I'm not alone in feeling this way. I saw the tweets. I can pull them up. I could check the receipts. People felt the same way. Literally after that, I mean, the performance was good. We're like, okay, cool. He did the Rumble thing. He was at Mania. That completely turned everyone around on it. It's like, wow, this guy is awesome. And he's got great music to boot as well. Like now I find myself playing 2K, jamming out to the Booker T song because it's a genuinely good song. So I think it's awesome. He's getting his own movie as part of the Sony Marvel universe. It is a weird track record right now as far as DC's had some pretty good hits. I mean, I love Peacemaker. Batman was obviously resoundingly successful. Suicide Squad was great. So they're in a pretty good, space right now as far as their stuff goes. Marvel, the MCU is always kind of on a consistent roll, but Sony Marvel right now, I mean, not counting Far From Home or No Way Home or whatever. The Venom movies were good. They're not critically acclaimed by any means, but I enjoyed them. And the Morbius movie I haven't seen yet, but I heard it was just panned by everyone that I talked to about it. So hopefully this does better than those and they're not going too over their head with this. But like I said, I'm excited. I think Bad Bunny is killing it right now. I see him in commercials. I see him winning awards and stuff. God bless this guy. And he still made it back to be in the Rumble this year. I mean, He's really a gem. He's awesome. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer for WWE easily.
Yeah, in terms of the celebrity wing, are you kidding me? He was in after the first Rumble appearance alone. But here's something that I know we can both get behind in a big way. Cinemacon, whole bunch of different announcements. Like I said, the Batman 2 has been officially greenlit. Venom 3 from Sony. We got the official title for the third Spider-Verse movie, which is going to be called Beyond the Spider-Verse. We got Avatar: The Way of the Water. That was the official subtitle revealed by Disney. But perhaps the most interesting thing was such a throwaway quote, but all Marvel fans are kind of latching on to it in terms of the possibilities. And that's the fact that Kevin Feige said he had just gotten back. This is during when he was speaking at Cinemacon. He had just gotten back from the first Marvel Studios creative retreat in 3 years. And for those who don't know, these creative retreats happen every couple of years with the Marvel Studios Parliament. That's what the figureheads behind the MCU call themselves. Kevin Feige, Nate Moore, the Sarah Finn, who's the casting director, all the different executive producers that are attached to all these movies. They went on this retreat and they mapped out the next 10 years of Marvel films. The specific quote from Feige says that they have a board, and that board takes us through the next decade. And those films are unique and special, and they are meant for your theaters, which is really great to hear. I know we're both theater experienced guys, and I'm glad that that experience is going to be preserved. But he also noted that in the next 10 years, those stories will be with existing characters as well as new characters and new storytelling tools with the multiverse. Anything can happen. Graham, by comparison, I put out a tweet when this quote went out. The first 10 years of Marvel Studios took a gap year in 2009. No film was released. 2 one-film years in 2010 and 2012. Not a single streaming series. And they didn't have the rights to the Fantastic Four or the X-Men. In 2021 alone, that's before this 10-year thing was mapped out, they released 9 projects, 5 streaming shows, 4 theatrically released movies. If we're looking at the next 10 years, based on how 2021 fed us fans, we're going to be looking at double or triple the content. And we have the X-Men to play with now, the Fantastic Four to play with now. Such a small quote, probably no more than 30 words. That's the biggest thing we got from Marvel's grand Cinemacon presentation. But the possibilities in terms of analysis and where we can go with this, I think are endless. What was your reaction to hearing Feige's words about 10 years?
Yeah, I saw that on Twitter. Very exciting. And the thing is, too, is that, listen, not everything they say is complete. Like, they don't know exactly the date of which movie's coming out in 2029, for example. But I know you're very aware of this. I've seen you tweet about it. If you go back to the first one, not the first one, but they did one of those things where they mapped out like the next 5 years worth of movies from 2014 through 2019 with Endgame. They didn't call it Endgame, but it was Infinity Part 1 and 2. And they called it the Serpent Society, that whole thing. And that wasn't the name of it and whatever. There were a couple different things that were changed as far as movies that were added. Some movies like the Inhumans movie didn't obviously happen and stuff like that. Beyond that, though, if you look at it, they kind of nailed most of it, at least 75%, if not more. Like I find that stuff fascinating to go back and watch now with like the fan excitement over certain things. And then it's like, it actually happened at that date around that time, or it had that name and it wasn't changed. And that was 5 years earlier. We're talking 10 years now. So again, anything can change. It's the same thing with wrestling. Plans change, pal. That's what they say all the time. Plans change. And that can happen with this stuff too. But I'm excited. There's so many different possibilities. They've, like you said, fed us a lot of new content over the last year with new characters, returning characters. We talked about it last time, but with Moon Knight, the Eternals, we're getting Miss Marvel in a couple weeks. Like, there's a lot of new characters they're giving us, and I'm latching on to pretty much all of them. I'm invested in all these new faces, and I'm excited to see where they go. Shang-Chi being another one. So yeah, I think it's very exciting. There's so much stuff. Like, it really is crazy. I said this, I'm not the only one, but coming out of No Way Home, when that movie did as amazing as it did. And then you're sitting there on the ride home thinking to yourself, holy shit, like, this is one of the best movies they've ever done. And they haven't even touched X-Men, Fantastic Four, or Deadpool yet. Like, that is wild. That is wild. And there's so many more characters. I don't read the comics or anything, but I'm aware of certain people they haven't even brought up yet. They haven't even brought into the movies yet. Sequels to movies that we haven't seen yet from all the new stuff from last year and all the streaming shows too. So I know there was that stigma for a while among certain people. Well, they're giving us too much content. I feel like that's the minority at this point, honestly, because if it's all good shows, then what is there to complain about? I'm not saying every show is a home run, but all this stuff is great, and we're being consistently fed all of it. Like, we went a couple of months without any content earlier this year in between Spider-Man and Moon Knight. We had about 2 or 3 months of like nothing. But even with Star Wars kind of kicking back up again, the Obi-Wan show and Miss Marvel, like I said, Moon Knight wrapping up next week. Doctor Strange comes out next Friday. I mean, how could we forget about that? It's exciting, man. And that, just for fans of that stuff alone, if you don't watch anything else beyond this stuff, you're set. Like, for people that watch like 7 different shows at a time, first of all, I don't know how you do it. But second of all, you're good. Like, you could be satisfied with the Marvel stuff alone. It's a very exciting time right now, and I'm looking forward to all the upcoming projects.
Yeah, and like you said, I don't think that big board has dates locked in, and they're clearly not ready to reveal it to the world just yet. But the idea that there is a plan is the best part about this, because we never see these things happen with like pro wrestling, because it would spoil what happens. Like, you can see a slate and see movie titles and not know what's going to happen. But if you saw an AEW big board and saw, okay, MJF world title reign, June 2023, we'd be like, oh, well, then we know what's going to happen. But the point is, that stuff is happening behind the scenes in pro wrestling. I love that it's happening behind the scenes in Marvel as well, because it shows that like we're building towards something. And sure, I bet it's very abstract. I don't think we have movies set in stone for 2028, 2030, etc. But I do think we have checkpoints that we're looking to get to. I think we look at, what's going on with the multiverse right now. We're going to find out a lot more next week with Multiverse of Madness. I think they have checkpoints set in like 2024. Here's where we want to be in the multiverse story. And 2025, this is our finishing point. This is where we want to wrap it up. What movies deliver that checkpoint remains to be seen, but they know the avenue they want to go down. And like you said, plans will change. Characters will be hits, and they'll have sequels and spin-offs greenlit and inserted into the timeline. Characters will miss, and those sequels that might have been penciled in might be taken out. Eternals 2 hasn't been announced yet because of the fact that the box office was kind of lacking and the critical reception was pretty 50-50. While on the other hand, Captain America 4 was greenlit the day the Falcon and the Winter Soldier finale aired, because people were so in love with that show that they were like, all right, we're ready to move forward. So where these projects end up, I think we'll get a little bit of a taste by the end of the calendar year. I think we get another either phase 4 part 2 or a phase 5 full-on announcement, because we're getting towards that end. You mentioned the panel from way back. I remember it was fall 2014.
Yep.
I was watching on a found footage YouTube video style shaky camera of everything that was going on. But the recent one that happened was at San Diego Comic-Con in 2019.
I was going to say that summer, yeah.
None of those movies met their release dates because of COVID, but all those movies have come out. The only ones left on the docket that haven't been realized.
Blade, right?
Blade was announced, but they didn't give it a release date yet. So that was one that they gave the title card to, but they were like, we don't know when it's going to come out yet. The only ones that haven't hit theaters yet are Doctor Strange and Thor. And those are both due in the next couple of months. They didn't even announce Black Panther 2 at that panel. I believe we've gotten all the streaming shows from what was announced, because they didn't announce Moon Knight, She-Hulk, and Miss Marvel until D23, which was a couple months later in 2019. So the point is, we're getting to that point where all that we know for certain, because there are projects like the Halloween special that's coming out in October that we all know about, but they haven't officially given a title to and an announcement to. We're at that point now where we kind of have to be there, because we've already seen everything that they have announced. So those next 10 years, I think, like you said, it's pretty abstract towards the end, but I think what we're at closest to, the 2023s and the 2024s, are pretty rooted in stone, and I think they're getting close to showing us.
Yeah, I'm very happy you mentioned that, because this is like the most exciting time in any period, like coming out of WrestleMania season. It's like, all right, we just had this, like, Endgame was WrestleMania for Marvel. Like, they had their grand blow off to what they've been building to for not a year, but 10 years in that case, 11 years from 2008. And I'm excited. I'm thinking, all right, where do we go from here? And there's skepticism, of course, from people thinking, how can they top themselves? How can they do better than what they did leading up to this? Like, is this as good as it's going to get? And you can make the argument we haven't reached that peak, as far as we haven't gotten as good since Endgame, and I understand that. But everything we've gotten since then has either been good, great, or amazing. There's a lot of people that think that the No Way Home movie was better than Endgame, and I might agree with that. I mean, it was an incredible film. And there's so much more they can do with the multiverse stuff. There's so many different facets of the MCU. Again, as someone who's not an avid comic book reader, but just from what I've, from watching videos, seeing your tweets and stuff like that, it's really cool to see how much more there is still to go. The Moon Knight show is vastly different than anything we have seen from any of the shows or movies so far. And they've been doing this on the big screen since 2008. So imagine all the other stuff that we haven't even gotten yet. It's really cool to see. And I was really excited coming out of Endgame thinking, where do we go from here? They announced all that stuff. I was in England at that point. I was on vacation. So I literally stayed up until like 5 o'clock in the morning local time to watch that panel to see what was going to be announced, checking Twitter every 5 seconds. Did they announce anything yet? And we're kind of getting that now. Like you said, we're reaching the end of everything they promised. At that point, we know Guardians 3 is coming, for example, next year. Beyond that, though, they announced a bunch of stuff, but no release date. So we're getting to that point where we're going to have to find out more information coming out of Doctor Strange. And there were things even in 2019 that we were promised that we weren't even thinking about. Like, as far as, like, at that point, the Fantastic Four stuff and X-Men was just merely a pipe dream. I mean, it was official by that point, but we didn't know when it was coming. And now we're a lot closer now than we were then. And in addition, all the new characters we haven't gotten yet, and all the sequels for movies that weren't even out back then. I don't think anyone ever imagined WandaVision being as successful as it was, and Moon Knight being a big show right now, and all this other stuff. It's crazy, man. I give them a lot of props. I say it all the time, but Marvel really is a special thing. It's something that bonds a lot of people. It gives you always stuff to look forward to. And I don't feel cheated as a fan either. I mean, wrestling will sometimes give that to you. DC, I'll go see movies and I don't feel great coming out of some of them. Not to shit on them, but Marvel movies, aside from maybe Eternals, I walk out of every time thinking, wow, like I'm excited for where they go next. And they give you that no pun intended, the eternal post-credit scene you get every time now. So you're going to have something to look forward to. They nail it, man. It really is cool right now to be a fan. And in addition to all the other shows and movies going on right now, Marvel is consistently killing it. And no one does a better job of giving people stuff to look forward to, satisfying the fans, and continuing to innovate and come up with new stuff. They're not going back to Iron Man 7, 8, and 9. Like, there are new movies and moving past the familiar faces from the Endgame era, from the Infinity Saga era, and now moving on to new Avengers and characters. We don't even know when the next big team-up movie that is. It's something we didn't talk about either. Like, we don't even know when that's coming at some point. Is it going to be Young Avengers? Will it be something else? We have no idea, and anything can change in the next 6 months alone. So, again, man, it's very exciting, and I know for a fact, regardless of what happens, I will be satisfied, and that's the best part about it.
Yeah, we do have no idea. But one question I want to end on before we officially wrap this podcast is, it's such unknown with what we're going to get in the next 10 years. We expect a lot of sequels, obviously, to existing characters. What's one project, specifically a movie, because that's what Feige emphasized. He said a bunch of movies that are meant for your theaters. What's one movie that Graham Matthews needs to see made by Marvel Studios in the next 10 years?
One that we know about or one that we don't know about?
One that you just want. Like, if it's one that we know about, sure, but I also want to hear one that we haven't heard before.
Okay, so I'll give you two. One that we know about. The one that I don't know about, I'll need more time to think about that in a second. But one that we know about that I can't wait for, and we're coming up on the 5-year anniversary of when the second one came out, but Guardians 3. Mm-hmm. When I saw that first one, I was already into the Marvel stuff. I was already into the MCU. I had seen all the initial Phase 1 movies, the first Avengers film, which came out 10 years ago from next weekend. Holy crap, dude. It's incredible. It's incredible. And I saw that first one, I think the day after it came out I literally remember the day, May 5th, 2012. I just got done doing my SATs and whatever. I went to go see it with my family. Absolutely loved it. And it was at that point I started putting all the pieces together. Like, wow, like it was mind blowing to know all these movies were connected that I'd already been watching for a couple of years by that point. Fell in love with MCU at that point, only fell more in love with it from there. And I didn't make an appointment of viewing to go see all the Marvel movies until like maybe 2016, 2017. But I saw Guardians, half because Batista was in it, being a wrestling fan. And it literally became not only my favorite Marvel movie, but one of my favorite movies ever, period. To the point where I saw it in theaters when I was a sophomore in college, like 4 or 5 times, at least 3 times. It was probably the movie I've seen in theaters more than any other up until that point. Fell in love with it. And it just so worked out where I was a sophomore in college at that point. The second one, which again came out also that same weekend as Avengers, exactly 5 years later, it came out like 2 or 3 weeks, literally in the same position that you're in right now, right before I graduated. So like I had my last day of class. I saw Guardians 2. It came out that, again, May 5th. It was literally to the day, 5 years. May 5th, 2012, I saw Avengers 1. May 5th, 2017, I saw Guardians 2. And I love that movie as well. So Guardians holds a very special place in my heart. May 5th, 2022, exactly 10 years from the first Avengers movie and 5 years from Guardians 2. We're getting Doctor Strange. So I'm going to try to see it next Thursday to kind of complete the trifecta, because I'm a big calendar mark. But Guardians 3, though, is something I'm very much looking forward to. Thor, I know, is coming out this summer. Very excited for that. But Guardians is the one that holds a very special place in my heart. I've been waiting for this movie for years now. The whole James Gunn thing happened. That blew over. And now we're getting it by that point 6 years after the fact, which feels like an eternity, but I'm pumped for that. Beyond that, as far as stuff that we don't know about, it's a good question. There's probably things I'm not thinking of right now, but just off the top of my head, it's the common marquee answer, but anything with the X-Men, because I'm sure we might get a taste of it in Doctor Strange next weekend. We know Professor Xavier is going to be in it, obviously. How is that going to tie into it? They do a great job of acknowledging the previous era of movies. As far as like, I'm sure we will get a whole new cast for X-Men, but will we get an appearance at some point from Hugh Jackman? Unlikely, but maybe. I feel like they would like to have that fan servicey thing where they give people what they want to see. At least, like we saw that in Spider-Man, so I'm sure we might get that with X-Men too. Deadpool 3, I'm also very much looking forward to, just because I want to see how he meshes with the other characters in Marvel. Not even just for the movie itself, because I don't even know what the movie would be, but just to see him pop up in a post-credit scene, like even in Doctor Strange or whatever, which I don't think it will happen, just to see him interact with the other stars of Marvel. I think him and the Guardians is just a match made in heaven. So those are probably the two that come to mind. I'm sure there's more I'm not thinking of right now because there's so much stuff they haven't even begun to tap into yet. But those are the properties I'm most excited for at this current point in time. What about you, man?
Yeah, you mentioned a lot that I'm looking forward to. Guardians 3, obviously, and everything going on with the X-Men. I can't wait to see the avenues they go down with that, because it can't just be one movie. You have the Disney Plus potential of doing spin-off shows, and I'd love to see an Xavier's School of Gifted Youngsters as a 10-episode miniseries. I think that would be really cool, especially with the Disney Plus budget. But the two I'll go to, Captain America 4, one that we know about for certain. I'm a big Captain America guy. I love the lore. I love the characters. And I don't just love Steve Rogers. I love Sam Wilson. I love Bucky Barnes. I just love the vibe of those movies. And to kind of capture that kind of Winter Soldier spirit again with a solo Captain America movie, because Civil War, I'll say it till my grave. That's Avengers 2.5. I get it. That
It is,
Rogers,
dude.
Chris Evans is the lead of the movie, but it feels more like an Avengers movie than a Captain America movie. So whenever we get that, who knows? You know, you're a big dates guy. I'm a big dates guy. If that comes out in 2024, maybe it's 10 years to the day of Captain America: The Winter Soldier, which that's my favorite Marvel movie ever made. So
Amazing.
who knows? That's one we know about that I'm excited for. Fantastic Four, X-Men, also very jazzed about, but one I'll go very specific. I'm a big Namor guy. I'm a little bit of a comics guy. Very recently started reading just to kind of brush up on research and get familiar with characters that we're going to be introduced to. I don't always want to wait till the movies and everything, because, you know, when you write about this stuff, you want to bring some expertise. And I feel like I'm almost cheating anyone who reads my stuff if I'm just researching everything on my own by Googling it. I want to actually have a basis of knowledge. But I've been diving into a little bit of Namor, and he's not just Aquaman. Obviously, they're very similar characters because they're both Atlanteans and underwater, but this guy's got a chip on his shoulder, and I believe we're getting introduced to him in Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. And it's been said in rumblings and rumors that his performance, this is a prove it game for the character. If people take well to Namor, they're going to greenlight either a Disney Plus series or a movie or maybe even a full-on franchise. And the Marvel Cinematic Universe going underwater, I think, is something that has a lot of potential. And it's an avenue we've never explored before. It's a way to yet again 14 years into this universe, still do something new, which I think is the prerogative moving forward with Kevin Feige. Not just expand the stuff we already have, not just do sequels, not just do, like you said, an Iron Man 7, 8, 9, do a Shang-Chi and go to Qianlun and explore that avenue, and do a Namor movie and a Black Panther Wakanda Forever and go underwater. Do an Eternals movie and go to areas of the cosmos we've never been before. I think we're just getting started, and Graham, I think we're going to have a lot to talk about moving forward. But hey, that's your Thursday night edition of the Wrestling Inc. podcast. We went a little long tonight, but for good reason. Cinemacon obviously giving us a whole lot of goodies. But Graham, thank you so much for joining me once again on the show. You can see his Twitter right down there below at WrestleRant. Do you have anything fun coming up on your personal YouTube channel, on any of the sites you contribute to, that you'd like to plug now?
Nothing big specifically. I still got to post some interviews I did over Mania with Becky Lynch and a couple other people, Imperium, Gunther. I mean, he was still Marcel Bartel at that point when I spoke to him, but I spoke to them over Mania weekend, which was cool. Still got to post that stuff. Thankfully, I'm looking for a slower month in May, because April was the craziest month of the year so far. Obviously, with Mania and so much other stuff going on, trying to keep up with Moon Knight and stuff like that, it's been nuts. I'm hoping for a slower month in May. But then again, we got, WrestleMania Backlash next weekend. I'm likely going to be there for that because it's in Providence. It's like an hour and a half for me, so I'm hoping to be there for that. We got Double or Nothing coming up later this month or later on in May. Forbidden Door too. So it's going to be an exciting stretch going forward. As far as my own stuff, I'll be covering I watch all this stuff like a complete psycho. So just stay tuned to the YouTube channel, Twitter, website. Everything's WrestleRant. So I appreciate you having me on, Liam. This has been a blast.
Yeah, thank you so much for popping by, and definitely check out Graham's stuff. His WrestleRant stuff is whenever I miss a show, sometimes I'm like, all right, Graham will catch me up on everything I need to know. And I like hearing your flavor and everything too. So definitely check out WrestleRant on YouTube. As for my stuff, at Liam T. Crowley, you see it right down there below. All socials, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. I tweet like a madman about all the stuff I love. So if you're interested in like updates every hour, you got me on socials. But as for what I contribute to for work, you can find my articles on wrestlinginc.com. You can see my face. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can find me on TikTok giving daily wrestling news updates over there at Wrestling Inc. on TikTok. this Thursday night podcast every single Thursday, this exact time slot. And then for what I do with that Marvel stuff, if you enjoyed that Marvel chatter, we got a weekly podcast under thedirect.com, simply titled The Direct Podcast, which you can find on Apple, Spotify, Spreaker, wherever you get your audio shows every single Wednesday. Moon Knight reviews. We got a fun Doctor Strange review coming a week from tomorrow. We do fun drafts. We do fun lists. It's a good time overall. But like I said, the stuff we cover, there's no shortage of content for us to cover. And if you enjoy the content that we consume, you might just enjoy our analysis on it too. So be sure to check out everything going on with me, going on with Graham, going on with Wrestling Inc. as a whole. But thank you again for tuning in to the Thursday night edition of the Wrestling Inc. podcast. We'll be back here next week with, I believe, Raj Giri joining me to talk some Succession. But until then, we'll see you then.